Hello Internet, it's time for some more Freddy's Nightmares, and after the absolutely superb episode 4 that you can catch my review of in my previous video, the next episode can be at best and at my most charitable described as a filler episode, so we can rattle right through it. It's called Judy Miller, Come On Down, and it aired on the 5th of November 1988. It was directed by Tom DeSimone, who directed Hell Night with Linda Blair, if you're interested in that. And the cast seem to have done an awful lot of TV work, so solid jobbing actors, but nothing of note. Loads of episodes of Columbo and Murder, She Wrote, and Magnum and stuff like that, Peyton Place, sprinkled throughout all of their CVs. I really can't see the kids who a couple of months previously would have flocked to have gone and seen Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, really being concerned at all with the themes or the characters in this episode. It doesn't really even tangentially touch upon the Nightmare universe that we know and love, so it feels like filler. It feels like a rejected Twilight Zone script, to be perfectly honest. The Judy Miller of the title is a downtrodden housewife. She lives with her husband and her in-laws at her in-laws' place, and she's working really hard to put her husband through law school, and essentially no one appreciates her at all. And there are lots of hokey lines, like when she's doing the state lottery at the start, the radio announcer says that, like the jackpot's $22.3 million, that can buy a lot of dreams. And she says to her husband at one point in the first act, you know, you're following your dream. What about my dreams? You've forgotten my dreams. Yeah, dreams. We get it. It's a Nightmare on Elm Street TV series. It's such a weak link. Her only escapism is game shows, essentially. She works really hard and then she skivs after her in-laws who don't appreciate her, and her husband certainly doesn't appreciate her. So her escapism is in game shows, and she falls asleep one night and she dreams that she's a contestant in her favourite game show, Beat the House, except now it's called Beat the Reaper, and the questions are all personal about her, who's ruining your life, and the answer is the in-laws, and who doesn't appreciate you and stuff like that. So the first prize that she wins is a slightly more empty house when she gets the first question right, and her in-laws are killed by being strapped down, having honey poured on them, and supposedly flesh-eating ants poured on them as well, and they're supposedly eaten to death. It's all really hokey. She runs away from the studio and goes back to her house, where she sees her in-laws there, but they're just sitting zombified at the table, and she picks up her mother-in-law's hand, and there's a hole in the palm of her hand with ants coming out of it, and it's just, you'll have all seen that image. I was aware of it myself, probably through MTV, to be perfectly honest with you, because I'm not that cultured, but I looked it up, and it's originally it was in a 16-minute surrealist film from 1929 by Salvador Dali and Louis Buñuel called Un Chien Andalou. So there you go, that's where that first ever image of ants coming out of the palm of a hole in the palm of someone's hand comes from. So a strange sort of obtuse reference to something much more influential there. This is all Act 1. The only highlights I would note from Act 1, the guy that plays the host, Sammy Ray, an actor called Jeff Anderson, does a really nice job. He starts off really hokey and jokey and then gets nastier and nastier. They accentuate it by making his makeup slightly more and more demonic as it goes on, but it's obvious in some of his scenes that he's been studying how Robert Englund plays Freddy, so he brings some Freddyisms into his performance, which is a really nice touch, because it could be argued that Freddy's controlling this dream, or that character actually is Freddy, pretending to be the game show host. So he's trying a lot harder than the script actually warrants. And the weird thing is, because it's all a dream. At the end of Act 1, in the Dream Game show, she wins the prize money. She wins the $1 million, and then in Act 2, we stay with the family, but she has won $1 million, and I don't know where that came from. It's never explained. But she hires a maid to help her around the house, and the maid turns out to be her from the future, who's come back to warn her that the money's just papering over the cracks in their relationship, and she will end up killing her husband and going on the run and becoming this beaten down old woman that she sees before her. So the maid, her from the future, says, give up the money. The money's the cause of it all, and you'll end up stabbing him. But the younger version doesn't believe her, and the older version ends up, you probably think you know how it's going to end, but it's less clever than that. She does end up killing her husband, but there's no sort of paradox that she kills her because of what her future self told her, creating a paradox to cause it to happen. And there's no twist. She just kills him in the end, and that's the end of that episode. Really nothing more to say. Let's move on to episode 6 and hope it's a lot better. Well, another day, another nightmare, this time episode 6, Saturday Night Special, which first aired 12th of November 1988, and it's a really interesting little episode. Freddy light again, but I like the ideas that this one's playing around with, where I didn't connect with episode 5 at all, and didn't think that really the fan demographic for the Nightmare on Elm Street film series would connect with it. There's a little something here. It's not a perfect episode by any stretch of the imagination, but there's something there to tease out. There's a nice take on the two-act structure that we're getting used to in this series. Quite often a background character from Act 1 will come to the foreground in Act 2. This episode still utilises that, but also looks at the themes of the episode and switches it and looks at the same themes from another angle. This episode is on the surface about dating. So Act 1 follows our character Gordon, who's a bit of a schlub, and him and his friends are at the ice skating rink to check out girls. Now the 80s were a strange time, but I've never heard it said that the ice rink is a good place to go and pick up girls if all you're going to do is sit on the bleachers and watch them. Maybe you can strike up a conversation if you're actually on the ice, but Gordon and his friend are sitting on the bleachers just looking at girls, and he's pining after someone that he's got a crush on at work, and gets up and leaves when she sees that he's with someone else at work, one of the execs. And as he goes into the parking lot, he notices a dating agency across the road, Rendezvous Dating, and decides to go in. And he makes a little Faustian pact with the guy that's running the dating agency. Now, it's not like dating is now with your internet, because that didn't exist back then. So he had to sit in front of a camera and present himself and do a little piece about himself, and then their 80s computer would match him up with likely matches, and they'd check out his video and he'd check out theirs, and so on and so forth. But the guy that runs it persuades him, tempts him to lie, and he, boy, does he lie big. He now runs a multinational company. He used to play professional ice hockey in Canada. He just decides, you know, go hard or go home. So he decides to go hard at it. One nice little touch in this segment, because once we've had our intros, we always get a little Freddy segment, and usually we cut to Freddy's basement where he just does a little piece to camera. But here they use a nice little bit of green screen. There's a big high-angle long shot of him walking into the this small one-story building where the dating agency is, and then once he goes in, Freddy's glove comes over the roof. And then Freddy emerges from behind it huge, and he does his little piece to camera. I love that. I hope they do more of that kind of stuff. Because in the Twilight Zone, I always got a kick when you had the little intro segment, and then the camera pans around, and Rod Serling's just standing there in the coolest suit ever, smoking a cigarette, and then just says, "Yeah, this guy. We're going to follow him now. He's just about to enter the Twilight Zone." And Rod Serling was the coolest motherfucker. So I hope they do more fun stuff like this with Freddy in the future. Anyway, that was nice. The pacing's a little off in Act 1, but as you would expect, he gets a date with a gorgeous lady, and she's expecting him to be something that he's not, because he's lied. But as the date goes on, he's making all sorts of excuses as to why he won't be picking her up in a Porsche, and because the Porsche is in the garage and stuff like that. So he's got this beat up loaner car, which is actually his car. But when he gets her to the car, it's a fancy sports car. And when he takes her to the restaurant, he finds that he can actually speak French and orders in French. Now we all know what's going to happen. And that's why the pacing's a little off, because once we get past this point and she takes him, unfortunately she takes him back to the ice rink. Someone thought it was a really good idea to film at an ice rink, so the denouement of this, the climax of this particular act is back at the ice rink. It could have been a little better than that, but there we are. But we all know that he's going to come a cropper because of the lies he told, and lo and behold, he does. Because his date turns out not to be quite who he thought she was. Not in any kind of way that I would have liked. I'd have loved her to have turned out to be a demon or something like that, but that wasn't the case, unfortunately. But he does get his desserts. Now the date is an actress called Shari Shattuck, and I'd not heard of her before. I looked at her credits. One film jumped out at me. She's in a film called Death Spa, which I've not seen, but weirdly enough on YouTube I've just the other day watched a review by the Horror Appraisal of Death Spa, and if I can get my head around the technology of it, I'm going to put a link to their review of Death Spa in the little description field for this video, because it's definitely one that I want to check out. It sounds like a really weird sort of 80s gem, unlike anything I probably would have ever seen before. So I urge you to check out their review of it as well, if you want to find some interesting horror gems that you've probably never heard of. But the reason I mention her is because she owns this episode. She's the date in Act 1, and when we move to Act 2, the main protagonist in Act 2 is her flatmate, a plain girl called Mary, but she's in Act 2 as well, playing a slightly different version of the same character, because the character in Act 1 that she plays, Lana, is Gordon's nightmare dream version of her, and then we move back to the real world and her flatmate, and so she plays Lana again, but with a different twist on it. So she sparkles throughout the entire episode. God love her. In Act 1, she has to ice skate, she has to deliver lines while she's skating, she has to remove her dress while she's on the ice doing some choreography. She earns her money, and she gives a great performance, especially in Part 2. In Part 2, the second act of this, her flatmate Mary, who is a much plainer lady. Oh, trivia fans, this character is called Mary Kelly, which is the name of the unfortunate final victim of Jack the Ripper, the lady who's generally considered to be Jack the Ripper's final victim, Mary Kelly. I can't believe that was a coincidence. Lana, our Death Spa lady, persuades Mary to go and see this guy, this plastic surgeon called Tony, who can work miracles. And this is where the episode really kicks into another gear, because we get some really pointed and really well placed elements of, I would say, feminist criticism going on. The Lana character says something, and I wrote it down because I think this sort of hits the nail on the head of where this sort of episode is coming from. And there is some real grit, and I think genuine frustration and anger coming out with the status quo between the genders here. Because Mary's all feeling all depressed, and she's at home under the covers, and Lana's come back from a fancy date in a cocktail dress and stuff like that, and she's getting on at work where Mary isn't, and she's using her looks and she's using what she's got, but she's not dumb. She knows she's doing it, and she says to Mary, "A woman should be valued for who she is and not what she looks like, right? The way I see it, life's just one big beauty pageant. Like it or not, we're all contestants from the minute they slap your butt and tell your daddy it's a girl." So the battle lines are drawn there, but Act 2 is also another cautionary tale and another sort of Faustian pact made. Mary goes to see Tony, and Tony does in fact make her beautiful, and with her attaining of beauty, whole sort of worlds of sensation and possibility are opened to her, but other aspects are closed to her. And this section pops a lot more. There's none of the pacing issues. I wish we could have spent more time to explore this story, but they've got their structure to keep 20 minutes Act 1, 20 minutes Act 2. So Act 1 had to drag a little bit, and Act 2 felt a little bit more compressed, which is unfortunate, because I think Act 2 has a lot more to say. It has a lot more going on. While Tony's operating on her, he's monologuing the whole time while he's doing this surgery about how much he loves women, and but how he doesn't love beautiful women. These are the types of women I like. You know, he says to her before he operates on her, "You're perfect as you are. Are you sure you want to do this?" And whilst the 80s music is playing in the background and he's operating on her and monologuing, it just reminded me of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, talking about Phil Collins and Genesis a little bit. And he's telling her what a woman is and what a woman should be and how much he loves women. But as with all Faustian pacts, it comes with a price, and she can't feel anything. And when she, a really nice creepy touch, because they don't pretty up the actress who plays Mary, they actually get a completely new actress in, and the poor actress that plays the original Mary is actually credited as plain Mary, which is a little unfair. But whenever beautiful Mary, when she sees herself in the mirror at the end, she actually sees the other actress playing Mary, but all scarred up. It's pretty cool. I'm probably going to start rambling if I carry on any longer about this. Oh, there's a nice little through line. Sorry, one more thing. There's a nice little through line in this. The business that they're both working in is sort of dealing with the regeneration of Springwood after the Kruger business made the market slump. Things are starting to pick up now. And people are coming in to regenerate, and money's coming back into Springwood, and it's called the Springwood Beautification Project. And in order for malls and car parks and stuff to go up, the older sort of more run down and dilapidated houses that have got character and are part of the history of Springwood have to be flattened for these uniform buildings to be put up. So there's a nice little thematic tie there, and the point is made. The Lana character says about the Springwood Beautification Project that there's no difference between buildings and people, and old and run down but with character and history has to make way for shiny, new, homogeneous. There's a lot of stuff to get your teeth into in Act 2, especially in this episode. It's a little Freddy light, but the stuff that they're playing with, they play with it in an interesting way, whereas Episode 5 was really Freddy light and didn't feel like part of Freddy's world at all, or the Nightmare on Elm Street universe at all. It was boring and plodding, and like I said, felt a little bit like a Twilight Zone rejected script. This one, there's some fun to be had there, and hopefully we'll get... I know not every episode can be a Freddy episode. The next one is, by the way, but not every episode can be a Freddy episode, so I'm hoping that we get more like this, like Saturday Night Special, that can really play around with ideas, rather than just be sort of plodding filler with lame-o twists. So we'll move on. The next episode, I know, is a Freddy episode, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's called Sister's Keeper, and it is, in fact, a sequel to the first episode of the series, No More Mr. Nice Guy. But we'll get to that in the next video.